A powerful Republican insider is breaking ranks to warn the country about Donald Trump in a way most in her party still refuse to do. And while what she's saying is deeply validating for anyone worried about a second Trump term, it also comes with some sobering implications for 2024 and beyond. If you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our coverage focused on stopping Donald Trump from getting back into the White House. The Republican I'm talking about is former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, daughter of a Republican vice president, former number 3 in House GOP leadership, co-chair of the January 6th committee, someone who spent her entire adult life building the modern conservative movement from the inside. She is about as Republican establishment as it gets, and that is exactly why her latest warnings about Trump and about her own colleagues are so devastating. Let's start with what makes Liz Cheney different from the handful of other Republicans who occasionally criticize Trump. Most of them complain about his tone or his chaos, then turn around and say they'll vote for him anyway because of judges or tax cuts. Cheney is not doing that. She is saying out loud what a lot of Republicans only admit in private, that Donald Trump is not just flawed, not just controversial, but an active threat to the Constitution and to the survival of American democracy. In interview after interview and in her recent book, she has laid out 3 core warnings that almost no elected Republican will say publicly. First, she says that many of her former colleagues know Trump lost the 2020 election and know his conspiracy theories are nonsense, but they repeat them anyway because they're terrified of his base. She's described private conversations where Republicans mocked Trump's legal team, rolled their eyes at the stolen election claims, and admitted there was no evidence that would change the result. Then those same people walked out in front of cameras and told voters the exact opposite. Put bluntly, Cheney is telling the country, the lie about 2020 isn't a misunderstanding. It isn't confusion. It is a deliberate deception coming from people who decided their jobs were more important than the truth. Second, she's warning that if Trump gets back into power, he won't simply repeat what he did the first time. He will go much further. She has pointed to his own words about using the Justice Department to go after opponents, his obsession with retribution, and his public talk about being a dictator, even if he tries to pass it off as a joke. She connects that directly to the concrete plans being prepared by his allies. Firing career civil servants and replacing them with loyalists who will do what he wants, not what the law requires. Weakening independent institutions that constrained him the first time, including the DOJ and parts of the military and intelligence community. Surrounding himself with advisors who won't tell him no, because the ones who did that in his first term have all been purged. Cheney's argument is simple. The first Trump term was chaotic, in part because there were still people around him willing to push back. A second term would be staffed with people who have already shown they're willing to enable anything. And third, she's making it very clear that her own party's leadership is not going to save us from any of this. Listen to how she's been describing the current Republican conference, not as principled conservatives disagreeing in good faith, but as people who, in her view, made a cold calculation, side with Trump's lies, or risk losing your career. She said that members who once blasted Trump behind closed doors eventually lined up behind him again, not because they suddenly believed he was honest, but because they decided they could live with the lie if it kept them in power. This is the part that should really land with all of us. Liz Cheney is telling us that from her vantage point at the very top of the GOP, the majority of Republican officials are no longer operating based on any coherent conservative philosophy. They're operating based on fear. Fear of Trump, fear of his voters, fear of a mean post on social media, fear of a primary challenger, and we know she's paying a price for saying any of this. She lost her leadership role. She lost her House seat in a landslide primary where Trump personally targeted her. She has faced a wave of threats bad enough that she's had to travel with significant security. For any ambitious politician, that's a career-ending choice. She could have done what most Republicans did. Keep her head down, say a few carefully worded things about moving forward, and ride Trump's coattails back into power. Instead, she decided to blow the whistle from inside the House. Now, there's a very understandable temptation for Democrats and pro-democracy independents to see Liz Cheney as a kind of conservative savior figure, the principled Republican who will finally crack the MAGA spell and bring the party back to sanity. I want to be careful here. On Trump and on democracy, she deserves real credit. She did what almost no one else in Republican leadership was willing to do. She chose the Constitution over her career. But there are some difficult realities and caveats we have to talk about. First, Cheney is still a deeply conservative Republican on almost every policy issue. She supported Trump's tax cuts. She voted with his agenda the vast majority of the time when he was in office. On many social and economic issues, she is to the right of where the country is. So no one should confuse this with some kind of ideological conversion. This is about the rule of law and the basic functioning of our system, not about her suddenly agreeing with Democrats on healthcare or climate. Second, there is real concern among some strategists that if she decides to run for president as an independent or third-party candidate in 2024, it could unintentionally help Trump by pulling anti-Trump conservatives and moderates away from Joe Biden in key swing states. Cheney has said her top priority is stopping Trump, and she's floated every option from endorsing a Democrat to building a bipartisan coalition. But until we see exactly what she does, we have to keep in mind that even the most principled anti-Trump Republicans can end up making tactical choices that backfire. And third, as honest as she's being now, it's also true that for years she helped build the very movement that made Trump possible. The media ecosystem that rewards outrage, the radicalization of the base on issues like immigration, the party strategy of viewing Democrats not as opponents to debate, but as enemies to destroy. To her credit, she's begun to acknowledge some of that. But a real reckoning requires more than just recognizing Trump is dangerous. It means grappling with how a major American party became so vulnerable to someone like him in the first place. So where does that leave us? On one hand, it is enormously important that someone with Liz Cheney's background is looking into the camera and saying, Donald Trump is not just another Republican. He is uniquely unfit and uniquely dangerous. And many of the people still propping him up know that perfectly well. On the other hand, her story is a reminder that we cannot sit back and hope that responsible Republicans will swoop in at the last minute and fix this. The people in her party who might have been able to stop Trump from within have, for the most part, already chosen not to. They had their chance on impeachment votes. They had their chance to tell their voters the truth about 2020. They had their chance to break with him when he called for overturning the Constitution and promised retribution in a second term. Most of them chose silence, or worse, they chose to join in. Years from now, when we look back on this period, there will be a very simple question for every Republican official, every media figure, every donor, and honestly, every voter. When it became clear what Trump was and what he planned to do, did you confront the lies or repeat them? Did you side with the institutions that protect our democracy or with the man attacking them? Did you act or did you look away? Liz Cheney has made her choice, and she's made it at enormous personal cost. That doesn't make her a hero on every issue. It doesn't erase her policy record, but it does matter. Because every time a high-profile Republican insider breaks with the party line and tells the truth about Trump, it chips away at the wall of denial that keeps him viable. Our job is to make sure those warnings don't get drowned out by the noise. That means voting in every election, organizing, talking to friends and family who are still on the fence, and refusing to normalize what Trump is openly promising to do. This era will not be remembered kindly, but each of us still has a chance to decide which side of the story we're on. If you want to stay informed and stay engaged, make sure you're subscribed and share this with someone who still thinks it can't happen here. Because the people who built the Republican Party from the inside are now telling us it can. And that, more than anything, is why we have to stop it.